Evan Mercer was 13 when the smiling man first appeared. It was late summer in northern Indiana, the kind of humid, restless heat that made the nights feel longer than they were. Evan lived in a quiet neighborhood outside Mishawaka, on a street where nothing ever happened, until it did. The first night, Evan thought it was just his imagination. He had gone to bed around 10 p.m., brushed his teeth, turned off the lights, and lay staring at the ceiling fans slicing shadows across his room. For some reason, he felt drawn to the window. His bed faced it directly, and the thin curtains didn't do much to block the orange halo of the old streetlight across the road. He sat up. Under the buzzing light stood a man, tall, still, watching. Even from that distance, Evan could tell there was something off. The man's posture was too straight, too rigid. He wore a long, dark coat despite the heat, and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed most of his face, but not all. His smile was visible from 50 feet away. It was grotesquely wide, almost painted on, the kind of smile that looked too forced, too permanent. Evan stared, frozen, unsure whether to scream or pretend he hadn't seen anything. Then the man raised a hand. A small, slow wave. Evan backed away from the window and didn't look again that night. By morning, Evan convinced himself it was just a trick of the light, a shadow, a neighbor, something explainable. But the man came back, and the next night he was closer. He stood on the sidewalk in front of the Mercer's yard, still under the streetlight, still smiling. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He only stared. Evan watched from a slit in the curtain, heart hammering in his chest, until he couldn't take it anymore. He ran to his mother's room and told her what he saw. She was half asleep, annoyed. "It's probably just someone walking their dog. Go back to bed." But Evan knew what he saw. 3 nights later, the man was at the edge of the lawn. He didn't walk there. Evan never saw him move. It was as if he simply appeared, closer each time. His smile looked sharper now, more stretched, as though the skin around his mouth had torn at the edges. Evan didn't wake his mother that time. He sat in bed, eyes locked on the figure outside, holding his breath until dawn. That was the first night he didn't sleep. Soon, the smiling man began to visit every night at the same time, 10:37 p.m., as if bound to a schedule only he knew. The neighbors noticed nothing. No one else ever saw him. Evan tried to explain it to his mother again, then to his uncle who lived with them. Uncle Jim humored him at first. One night he even sat with Evan at the window, watching. At 10:37, nothing appeared. Uncle Jim waited 10 more minutes, then gave Evan a pat on the shoulder. "You've got an overactive imagination, kid. Cut back on the Goosebumps books." But Evan was sure. The smiling man didn't like witnesses. He only came when Evan was alone. One night, Evan pulled his desk chair to the window and waited. He was determined to catch the smiling man doing something, anything. Maybe he'd speak. Maybe he'd move. Maybe Evan could prove he was real. At 10:37 on the dot, the man appeared again. This time, he was standing just outside the front door. Evan gasped. He hadn't heard a sound, no footsteps, no creaking boards. But there he was, under the porch light, smiling up at Evan's window. His teeth gleamed, but they were wrong. far too many of them too sharp, like glass shards arranged in a grin. Evan bolted away from the window and threw up in his trash can. The house changed after that. Evan noticed things. Cold drafts in his room even with the windows locked. Smudges on the glass. Handprints too large to be his. Once he found dirt on the inside sill, like someone had climbed in. But nothing was broken. No alarms went off. His mom said he was imagining things. His uncle checked every lock and declared the house secure. "You're dreaming, buddy," Jim said. "It's probably sleep paralysis." Evan didn't argue. He just started sleeping on the couch in the living room. At least there were no windows near his head. When school started, Evan's grades dropped. He couldn't focus. He was exhausted. Teachers called home. His mom, stressed and overwhelmed, gave him an ultimatum. Go back to his room or she'd take him to a doctor. So Evan returned to his bed. That night, the smiling man was already inside. He stood in the corner, not moving, just watching as Evan lay under the blankets, pretending not to see him. The shadows wrapped around him like fog, but the grin was unmistakable. Luminous, obscene. Evan didn't sleep. After that, the man came closer. He approached the bed, but never touched Evan. Every time Evan opened his eyes, the man would stop. Every time he closed them, he could hear footsteps. Software careful. And always that breathing, slow and shallow, just inches away. He started counting his blinks. One wrong move and the man might finally reach him. On September 14th, Evan snapped. He took a kitchen knife and hid it under his mattress. He didn't want to hurt anyone. He just wanted to feel safe. He thought maybe, if the man saw it, he'd stay back. That night, Evan held the knife to his chest under the blankets. But it didn't help. The man stood over him until sunrise. No one believed Evan. His mom thought he was slipping into psychosis. Uncle Jim, less sure, suggested therapy. Plans were made, doctors scheduled. Evan never made it to the appointment. On the night of September 18th, something changed. The man didn't wait for 10:37. Evan awoke at 9:10 to find him crouched at the foot of the bed, almost childlike in posture, like he was mimicking sleepovers or fairy tales. But his face wasn't human anymore. The smile had cracked his skin open. The eyes were hollow, leaking darkness like smoke. His coat shifted like it was made of crawling things. His teeth kept going, row after row, deeper than a mouth should allow. Evans screamed, and this time someone heard. Uncle Jim burst into the room. He swears he saw nothing, but he smelled something foul and sweet, like rotten flowers and bleach. He said the air was colder than outside. Evan was curled in the corner, clutching the knife, eyes wide, lips trembling. After that, they locked the knife drawer. On September 20th, Evan was found unresponsive in his bed, wrists cut, a pillow soaked in blood. The window was locked from the inside. No prints, no signs of forced entry. His final whisper, as heard by paramedics before he lost consciousness, was, "He smiled at me." Evan survived, barely. He was placed in psychiatric care out of state, diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, but he never spoke again. The Mercer house was sold 2 years later. The new owners reported no disturbances, until their daughter, age 12, started sleeping with the lights on. She told her parents there was a man who watched her from the streetlight. He never moved. He only smiled. It wasn't supposed to rain. The forecast said nothing about storms, just dry heat and record-breaking highs. 102 degrees by mid-afternoon, 0% chance of precipitation. A heat advisory was even issued, warning people to stay indoors and keep hydrated. But by morning, the sky was the color of oxidized copper, dull metallic blue-green, and the air was heavy with a thick, warm mist. Not fog, not smoke, something stranger. I only noticed the smell once I stepped outside. It was sweet, like rotting pears and overripe lilacs. It clung to everything. My hoodie, the driveway, the lawn chairs. The moisture stuck to my skin instantly. Not mist, not humidity. This was something else. It felt like walking into a bathroom just after someone took a 2-hour shower with the door closed. I could taste it in the back of my throat. My phone said it was 97 degrees with clear skies and strong sun. But the sun was gone, replaced by a low glowing haze that filtered the entire world through a sickly blue filter. I stared up at the sky, but I couldn't see the clouds or even the source of the light. It just was. Weird weather, I thought. Some weird microclimate thing. The news would explain it later. I took a photo, posted it, captioned it. Apocalypse weather vibes LOL. Nobody laughed. The drive to school was quiet. Not because the roads were empty, there were cars, but because everything felt muffled, like the fog was swallowing up the sound. I asked my mom if the news said anything about this, and she just shook her head. She looked calm, too calm, eyes focused ahead, knuckles white on the steering wheel. There was an alert, she finally said, something about an anomaly. They took it down before I could read it. An anomaly? They said it wasn't dangerous. We pulled up to the school. That was the first red flag. No buses, no kids walking in, not a single person outside. Usually the place was swarming with life by now. Teachers rushing to unlock doors, students dragging backpacks, music blasting from someone's car. Today, the parking lot looked abandoned. "Are we early?" I asked. My mom glanced at the dashboard. No, she parked anyway. I stepped out and the fog, or whatever it was, immediately closed in. It wasn't cold, but it made me shiver. Visibility was maybe 20 feet. I couldn't even see the school building clearly until I was right in front of it. I walked toward the front entrance. The metal doors groaned when I pulled them open. Inside, the air was still and too warm. No fluorescent lights, no morning announcements, just silence. I made it to my first period class and opened the door. 5 people. That was it. 4 students and 1 teacher, sitting at their desk, hands clasped tightly, eyes staring at nothing. I hesitated. None of them looked up when I entered. The windows were so fogged over, it felt like we were underwater. I sat down. Nobody spoke. Time crawled. I kept checking my phone. No signal, no Wi-Fi. Just a loading spinner where my messages should have been. I tried texting my friends. No response. I tried checking the weather again. Clear skies, 101 degrees. Sunny. Bullshit. Then came the noise. The intercom sputtered to life, static. Then a voice, crisp and hollow. "Attention. This is a lockdown. This is not a drill. Lock all doors, close all windows, shut off all lights." It repeated, slower the second time, more distorted. "This is not a drill." Our teacher snapped out of his trance, rushed to lock the door, and flicked the lights off. He pulled the blinds, then sat back down, breathing fast, eyes wild. Nobody asked questions. Nobody needed to. Something was very wrong. Then came the second noise, not through the intercom. Outside, clicking, rhythmic, mechanical, but not quite. Too organic, like hundreds of hard plastic legs tapping on metal surfaces. It echoed down the hall, getting louder, faster, closer. I clenched my fists so hard my nails cut into my palms. Then something passed by the classroom window. A silhouette, tall enough to block the entire pane. It had too many limbs. The shape dragged behind it like a curtain of wires or vines or arms. It didn't walk. It glided. And the clicking came from inside it, from its bones. The teacher gasped. Then he stood up. "No, don't!" one of the students hissed. But he didn't stop. He unlocked the door, stepped outside, and shut it again, without breaking eye contact with us. We waited for him to move, but he didn't. He just stood there, facing us through the narrow window in the door. His eyes were glassy. His mouth hung slightly open. And then he smiled. The two students closest to the door stood up. They looked at each other, then back at the rest of us. Their faces were slack, smiles too wide. Something about them changed in an instant, like their skin didn't quite fit right anymore. One of them climbed onto a desk and crawled into the ceiling tiles. The other followed. We heard them above us, the tapping of feet. Then a loud crash from the hallway. I curled up under my desk, barely able to breathe. The clicking was back, closer than before. The windows were turning dark, not from fog, but from shapes, faces, dozens of them, all watching us, eyes unblinking. I wanted to scream. The remaining student beside me was shivering. She grabbed my hand. "I think we're not supposed to look at it," she whispered. "At what?" "The thing. Outside, it's not real if we don't look." I squeezed my eyes shut. The clicking grew deafening. Metal panels vibrated. The glass on the windows cracked in spiderwebs. Then came the scream. A low, guttural howl through the intercom, mixed with whispering voices, speaking backwards, forwards, layered on top of each other. I could feel them crawling inside my ears. And then, silence. When I opened my eyes, I was alone. No fog, no teacher, no classmates. The room was dusted in fine, pale ash. The desks were covered in handprints. On my desk was a small black device. It looked like a GPS, but when I turned it on, it didn't show a map. Just numbers. Latitude, longitude. No label, no heading, just blinking coordinates. I checked my phone again. Still no signal, no Wi-Fi. But now everything was wrong. The weather app said clear skies, but the photo behind it showed static. I opened my texts. All my conversations were blank. I searched my city on Google. Nothing came up. It was like the town had been erased. I posted on Reddit, Twitter, anywhere. No replies. Nobody knew where I was. Nobody even acknowledged the name of my city. It was like it had never existed. I tried calling my mom again, straight to voicemail. Then I heard the clicking, faint, but growing louder. I'm writing this from the school's computer lab. Somehow, this old desktop still works. I don't know how much time I have. I don't know if this message will reach anyone. But if it does, if anyone out there is reading, please help me. The GPS coordinates are latitude 38.2719, longitude negative 121.5042. Find out where that is. Tell me where I am. Before the clicking gets here again. I was born and raised in a town so small you could walk from one end to the other in 15 minutes. It wasn't marked on most maps, and people liked it that way. Everyone knew everyone. Not just names and faces, but birthdays, family histories, even shoe sizes if you were close enough. Strangers stuck out like sore thumbs, and gossip traveled faster than the weather. Life moved slowly. Mornings were quiet and evenings quieter. Most homes didn't even lock their doors. We didn't need to. Kids played in the streets till dark, and the post office was more of a community center than anything else. People sent actual letters, not just bills and coupons, but real, handwritten letters. It was tradition. Some still believed you could tell the state of someone's soul by their penmanship. My mother loved sending letters. She sent me one every week when I went away for college. Even though we talked on the phone every Sunday, she'd include little pressed flowers from her garden or clippings from the local paper. When I moved back after graduation, she still left me letters, slipping them into my mailbox even though we lived a block apart. Then came the fire. It happened overnight. No warning. My parents' house, gone. I got the call from the fire department just after 2 a.m. They told me the structure was too damaged to enter and that there were no survivors. The official story was faulty wiring. But the thing was, they had just had the place rewired the year before. Brand new system, paid for by my father's retirement bonus. That always stuck in my mind. The town was shaken. Everyone offered condolences. People baked casseroles, sent sympathy cards. Some even cried harder than I did. But something was off. There were whispers. Not loud enough to hear details, but just loud enough to know they were about me. About them. I didn't ask. I didn't want to know what people thought they knew. I inherited their house, or what was left of it. The insurance came through. I stayed in my small apartment near the center of town. The house was still too raw for me to deal with. Weeks passed. Then one morning I found an envelope in my mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Just my name. Thick paper, blocky handwriting. Inside, a single sheet of paper, heavy stock, hand-cut edges. The message read, "You never asked why." No explanation, no signature. I stared at it for hours. I showed it to my friend Alex, who ran the post office. "Probably a joke," he said. But his eyes didn't match his voice. He looked nervous, like he'd seen it before. Over the next few days, more letters came. One every other day. Each the same heavy paper, the same block letters. Messages like, "The flames weren't the start. Ashes don't lie. We are what we bury. I kept them in a drawer. I didn't tell anyone else. I didn't want to give whoever was doing it the satisfaction. Then one morning I found something different. A package. Same thick paper but wrapped around something hard. Inside was a charred doorknob. Brass. I recognized it immediately. It was from my parents' front door. My stomach twisted. I went to the police. The officer on duty, Hal, was a guy I'd gone to school with. He stared at the doorknob and told me someone was probably trying to scare me. He offered to file a report. That was it. No follow-up, no questions. He seemed reluctant. Later that night, I found a letter on my pillow. Inside my locked apartment. You're close. Don't stop now. That night, I didn't sleep. I went back to the burned house the next day. The property had been untouched since the fire. I walked around the perimeter, crunching over debris, charred beams, broken bricks. But then I noticed something strange. Near the back corner where the kitchen had been, the soil was disturbed, like someone had been digging. I returned with a flashlight and a shovel after dark. The dirt gave way easier than I expected. I hit something solid about 2 feet down, a wooden box, scorched but intact. I pried it open. Inside were letters, dozens of them, old ones, yellowed with age, addressed to my mother. But they weren't from my father. They were from someone else, a man named Curtis. Some dated back 20 years. Others were recent. The tone shifted over time, from affectionate to obsessive to angry. I took them home and read them all. My mother had been corresponding with him for years. At first, they were friends, then more. She told him they couldn't be together, that she loved her family. But he kept writing. The last letter was chilling. If I can't have you, no one will. The postmark was 1 week before the fire. I showed them to the police. They launched an investigation, but Curtis was nowhere to be found. According to town records, he had never lived here. No one remembered him. It was like he'd never existed. But the letters were real. 2 days later, I got another one in the mail. You opened the box. Now open your eyes. There was no sleep that night either. The next day, I found a photo slipped under my door. It was old, grainy. A group of people standing in front of the church. My parents were there, younger, smiling. But behind them, just barely in the frame, was a man with sunken eyes, watching. Curtis. That night I went to the church. It was nearly midnight. The doors were unlocked. Inside it was dark and cold. I walked past the pews toward the altar. The candles had long since burned out, but there, lying in the center aisle, was another envelope. He never left. As I turned to leave, I saw a figure standing by the door. Tall, thin, watching. I ran. No shame, just fear. I didn't sleep at home that night. I drove until sunrise and checked into a motel 2 towns over. The police found nothing at the church. I stayed away for weeks. No letters came. I thought it was over. Then, one morning, I returned home. Everything was where I left it. I walked to the mailbox out of habit. It was empty, but taped to my front door was a photo. Me, sleeping in the motel bed, a note scrawled on the back. You can run, but you're still on the map.